I dwelt alone in a world of moan, and my soul was a stagnant tide, till the fair and gentle Eulalie became my blushing bride, till the yellow-haired young Eulalie became my smiling bride. Greetings, Poe fans, and welcome back to our degree episode. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I'm Jeannie Smith.
And we
We are the
are
Potastic
fantastic.
Two. I was wondering, I was like, are you going to say it? Come on.
Oh yes, oh yes. I was queuing with you.
Yes, we're queuing. We're queuing it. We're queuing it.
So you might ask, why are we talking about brides in May? Well, this episode may not air today, but we want to say happy anniversary to Edgar and Virginia. They were married May 16th, 1836.
Yeah. So almost, let's see.
It's almost
Oh, I don't want to do
200.
math.
I think it's
Yeah, almost. I think it's
189th.
178. I think this is their 170. Wait a minute.
It'd be 89th.
No, 177th, because next year would be 178th.
Well, but it was 30, yeah, 36. So you
Yes,
minus
because
10.
yeah. So no, not next year would make it. We still need 10 years because it'd be
Right. That's what I say, 189. Or yeah, one set. Yes, never mind.
okay.
Ah,
You said 1836, right?
yes.
Okay. So that would be 64 plus 100 plus 25.
Yes. So you're going to do the math.
Yes. Because
I
I
meant,
was, and I got
I meant to,
sidetracked. Hang on.
I meant to subtract it all before we started.
So 1836, right?
Uh-huh.
Minus, and it's 2025. Okay, so that's 189. So you were
Yeah.
correct
Okay. I
with
thought so.
189, but it was weird because it was like, yeah, because next year means that would be 10 from 200.
Correct.
Good
Yes.
Lord.
Yeah.
Math. Math.
Ah,
The
and
maths.
it is the end of the day. But yeah, I
Exactly. And it's Friday.
that is very true. That is very true. But yes, so
Yes.
happy 189th anniversary to Edgar and Virginia.
Yes. And however, they married actually the full 11 years, or did she die before the 11th anniversary?
He died in January. So,
Okay. So they were married for 10 years,
yeah,
but it was in the 11th year of their marriage that she
correct.
died.
If she had lived, yes, yes, that would have been the 11th year. Correct.
Yep.
All right.
So, yeah. So that's why we're talking about it on today, May the 16th.
Yes. So we're going to talk a little bit about their wedding and we're going to
Hmm.
talk about wedding practices from back then. Jeannie's done research on that. And then
Hmm.
I looked at anniversary practices or customs and things like that.
Yep. So it's like a lot of stuff happening. So I guess we'll start with what happens before, during the wedding and stuff.
Hmm.
Now, we all know because we all love to watch. Well, we may not all love to watch, but we know there's a lot of reality TV going on. And one of the big ones that has taken over, and actually, I think this is like their 19th season, is Say Yes to the Dress.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That I have watched that a long time ago. Yes.
Yes. So it's still in production. And the one big thing is about how the brides, they have to go and find the perfect dress, and they pay all kinds of money. I mean, I even saw one of the dresses, it was like $53,000 for a dress.
That's
And
insane.
I'm going,
Yeah.
what? But it was cool. Was from head to toe in Schwartz.
Bavarsky.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Crystals. Couldn't say that word.
Gesundheit.
Yes, bluff me. Okay. So, but back in the 19th century, in the 1800s, you didn't have all that pizzazz. You didn't have all those with people and these giant weddings and people on the groom side, people on the bride's side, and everything. It mostly was just a symbolism of commitment
Yes.
and new beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the wedding dress, it's pretty much they just picked a dress.
Yeah.
It was like a Sunday best kind of thing,
That
kind of
makes
like a
sense.
church type dress. It wasn't white or anything, it was just a
That came
dress.
later, not too much later.
Exactly. And the budget constraints were very much in place because it wasn't a lot of families with a lot of money all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Money was very tight. It was impractical for them to spend large sums of money, especially on a wedding that most of the time wasn't based around love. It was mostly convenience.
Convenience or marrying to collect a dowry and business associations and things like that.
Yeah,
In a
because it was a business
yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
It's like one would sell their daughters to another to bring the families together.
Hmm.
Now, it was in the summer of 1840, over 200 people crammed in the family home of Catherine M. Noble Davidson to watch her wedding.
Hmm.
Catherine wrote her friend a description of her appearance during the ceremony. Her dress was white satin, very rich and thick dead white. The bosom made with folds across, with one row of shell trimming around the neck, two rows on the sleeves. The skirt with long, without any trimming, deep blonde on the sleeves. My gloves white, kid satin on the tops and edged with blonde. My
Hmm.
hair was plaited behind, and my Grecian curls were curled very beautifully and worn behind curls in front. Mark orange blossoms were sent to me to wear in my hair. I wore them in front, buried in my curls, and beautiful white rose in behind. Now, this lady, Catherine Noble's wedding,
Okay.
became one of the big social events of that year. And over 200 people crammed into the family's home. This wasn't a church, wasn't outside. This was all in the house.
Wow.
So 200 people, over 200 people, went into the family home and they had to spill out into the front yard. So people weren't even inside during the
Oh
ceremony.
my goodness.
And the Met collection actually includes a wedding dress from the same period that reflects a much simpler fashion that likely would be more commonly worn by brides, not so much her. Hers
Okay.
was one of the bridezilla types of today
Mm-hmm.
that you could probably see.
Right.
So it didn't actually become typical to have a white wedding gown, especially. It was all about, like we said, it was convenience, it was for business dealings. They were community events. You would invite your neighbors, your friends, the family. They had dancing, they had ceremonies, they would come over, they would eat, they would celebrate, and it would basically a block party is kind
Yeah.
of what it was. But it developed as want to do for many years because as we grew as a nation and people started making more money and the weddings started turning from business deals into more
Mm-hmm.
elaborate wedding
Right.
venues,
Well, and
things changed.
yeah, and I was going to say, adding into about the white wedding gowns, it wasn't until 1840 that Queen Victoria popularized because
Mhm.
she wore a white gown, then everybody wanted to be like her. And so that's where that tradition came from. I had never read that before, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's why the lady I just read all that description for,
Yes.
that's why she made such a big deal about what she was wearing
Yeah.
and why it's part of one of it not specifically, but why the wedding gowns are part of the Met collection
Yeah, that
is
makes
because of
sense.
Queen Victoria. Because
Yeah.
we actually discussed this, because after Prince Albert died,
Hmm.
then that's when she started wearing all black.
Exactly. Yeah. And which
So,
it's just interesting to think about the contrast of the white to the black, and nothing in
well,
between.
yeah, it's just two separate ends of the spectrum there.
Absolutely. So what else did you find on wedding customs from the 19th century?
That was pretty much it. It was just
Okay.
mostly family affairs.
Yeah.
It was neighborhood block parties,
Okay.
or very small venues with families. It was only very few, like I read, that had the means to throw such elaborate parties
Party.
and
Yeah.
invite people. But once again, it most of the time wasn't about love. It was about convenience
Yeah.
or business dealings.
Okay. The
Or in, I guess, Edgar's, I guess we can't really say it wasn't a business deal. It
no,
was a family affair because literally they
yes.
could just, they just had one family to invite to the wedding.
Exactly. Well, one other custom that I found, and this all ties back to Queen Victoria, her
Mm-hmm.
daughter, named Victoria,
Mm-hmm.
was walked down the aisle in 1858 to the bridal march, dun 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 dun. And so that became popular for the bride and the bridal party to march down the aisle to. Thought that was interesting
Yeah.
as well. So they were very heavily invested or
Influential.
yeah, influential in they who knew they were influencers back then in the mid
Well, I mean, they
1800s.
were the
Yeah,
royal party, and so,
absolutely.
and the irony of it all is they were influencing the traditions in America, even though
Yes. And still
we
and
were trying to
yeah.
break away from those traditions.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and when you think about other members of the royal family like Princess Diana
Hmm.
and even before that, it's like there has been so
Queen
much.
Elizabeth II.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much, even Kate now, the
Hmm.
fashion wise sense and that kind of thing. It's really still, they're still influencing America, even though we're not supposed to think that way.
Exactly. Yes. We're not supposed to be influenced by the British royalty.
Exactly. Well, there's a whole lot of there was a lot more information about Edgar and Virginia's ceremony for their wedding and everything than I kind of anticipated. I knew a few things, just basic things, but digging into this, it was really interesting. So we already kind of knew he was 27. She was
Hmm.
actually 13. And there is debate about where the ceremony took place based on two different people's eyewitness accounts, letters, and things like that. And so
Yeah.
one of the accounts was that it took place at Mrs. Yarrington's boarding house on 11th and Bank Streets. And so
Mhm.
the other one was the house of Amasa Converse at 8th and Franklin Street. And it to me it makes more sense that it was here because Amasa Converse married them.
Yeah.
But he could have, this other family could have said, "Oh, we want you to have, how for our home to have the wedding ceremony." And then he came over to the house. So, I mean, who knows?
True. And then that's the thing. I mean, it could have taken place to where they had the ceremony at that, say his name again.
Amasa Converse.
Thank you.
Yes.
At his house, and then they went over to the other house for like a reception type event.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, Jeannie, that could very well be the case. I would
Yeah,
not doubt that at all. But yeah,
because,
yeah, so he performed the ceremony. He also was an editor for the Southern Religious Telegraph. And so,
hmm,
so he also was an editor, so he had that in common with Poe, or I should say Edgar, since we're talking about the Poes.
yes,
And
both the pose. So yeah,
yes,
we need to talk about, yeah,
yes. As we're, I think, naming this episode, Here Come the
comes the
Poes.
pose. Oh, okay, no.
Yeah. And so Amasa Converse was Presbyterian. So I guess
Yes.
in essence, the ceremony, when you have to infer from this, would have been like if I'm assuming that there probably was some religious verses, something, Bible verses read possibly. So it would have been more of a
Absolutely.
Presbyterian, especially from that time frame. And that just makes perfect sense.
Well, and if you think about it, if this took place in, well, Virginia is considered part of the South,
Hmm.
because it was one of, well, it actually was the colony with the first British.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, religion I think would definitely have it. They would have a lot of uh, scriptures being read
Hmm.
and that kind of thing because those were the actual, isn't it the wedding? I can't remember it, but in the Bible, what's it called? It's an actual part of one of the scriptures is the actual wedding. Like, do you promise to?
Oh, yeah, like the vows and things.
Thank you.
Yes,
There
yes,
is actually a part in the
yes,
Bible that
there
actually
is.
has the vows.
I
Yes,
don't remember what book of the Bible it is. I was going to say, do you want to look it up while I keep
I
talking
will.
about some things?
Yeah, you
So,
keep going on about the anniversary or whatever, and I'll look up.
yes, because that's a really good point, Jeannie. That'd be kind of a good
Mhm.
note to mention. So Amasa Converse kind of wrote about remembering Virginia as a bride, and so from quoting from him, he said she was polished, dignified, and agreeable in her bearing, possessing a pleasing manner, but very young. And part of the reason that is that since Virginia's father had died a few years before Edgar and Virginia were engaged and were here to the ceremony, um, the father could not consent because he wasn't around. And so
Mhm.
what happened is on their wedding day, Poe signed a marriage bond, basically saying and verifying, as he was, I almost do air quotes on that, verifying
Mhm.
that Virginia was 21 and able to basically give consent without her father being present. And so there was another person that had to witness this, and so another relative, I've got Cleland written down, and I forgot to write the first name down, but co-signed for this. And so I thought that was really interesting, but it makes total sense because when you look at, probably, Jeannie, it's probably in what you're talking about, the Bible verses, when the preacher or priest or the officiant who is marrying someone asks, who gives this bride or who gives this woman, lady, to be married, that would give the consent. That's that question that's always asked. And so in modern
Exactly.
times, it's really kind of become, I've been to weddings where it's her mother and I, if the father is answering. Sometimes if the father still is not around for whatever reason, the mother will say, I, as her mother, gives consent.
Exactly.
So it's evolved.
Because
It's evolved based on more modern times.
yes, because most of, the vows that we hear now today, we are gathered here today in the eyes of God to get, to bring together
Right.
this man
Yeah.
and yeah,
Hmm.
and that thing. Most of it has been, shall I say, pick and choose from each kind of verses and
Right. Yes.
bastardized.
I knew you were going to say that, but I was like, where is it? I know she's going to say that word.
Yeah. I was like, I was trying not to, but was
It's
like,
true.
was
Yeah.
it?
Well,
So
and
they have bastardized a lot of scripture verses.
right. Well, yes, and some officiants, depending on if it does have a religious aspect or not, they write their own. It is loosely based on the traditional sense of the word from the Bible, but
Mhm.
and some people still use straight from the Bible. It just depends on what religion, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and the thing of it is they, they take it's based on some of the same things is that you leave behind your mother and father and you become one with your husband or wife.
Exactly.
So
Hmm.
that and then you have the other things to honor by all, marriage kept pure,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So it has its basis in Christianity by using the scriptures
Right.
to help. So yeah, I can see where it may not have been predominant in their wedding
Right.
vows, but I'm pretty sure that whomever married them, Doctor or not Doctor, what was his name again?
Asa Converse.
Thank you. Converse. I'm just going to call him Converse.
Think of tennis shoes. Think of tennis shoes.
Yes, tennis shoes,
It's spelled the
Converse.
same way.
Yeah, so Converse probably did pull out some scripture to read during the
Absolutely. Yeah.
wedding, and it was a staple and probably is still a staple
Hmm.
in most Christian marriages.
Yeah. Did you
Um,
find that information?
well, like I said, the only thing they had was like the different scriptures that they pulled out from. So,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I swear I thought there was a part in the Bible
I thought so too.
that, had that. So you keep talking, I'll keep
Okay.
looking because I
Well,
know it's in here somewhere.
I agree with you, and that's not something that we had thought about looking
Hmm.
up and in our research. So this is the interesting thing is they had several guests attend this ceremony. And so obviously Virginia's mother, Maria Poe Clem, who everyone knows as Muddy, Poe's
Hmm.
boss at the Southern Literary Messenger, his name was Thomas White. White's daughter, Eliza, also attended. There was a pressman, and this was the man who co-signed. I knew I had written down his name, his first name, in another spot. This was the man who co-signed verifying Virginia's age for consent. And his name was Thomas W. Cleland, and then his wife, and the wife's name wasn't mentioned in my research. Uh, the
Oh, okay.
the printer of the messenger, William McFarlane, attended. There was an apprentice in the messenger's office named John W. Ferguson. He also attended. The boarding house owner where Poe lived, Mrs. James Yarrington, attended. And then one of Virginia's friends, Jane Foster, was also there. There were some others, but those were the most noteworthy of the guests that attended. And one of the things that Jane Foster said about Virginia was she had on a new traveling dress and a hat. And so that's what she wore, and that they ate wedding cake that was baked by Muddy. And so they did have a wedding
Cool.
cake. So I thought, well, that obviously was something that was traditional back during the, early to mid 1800s, because you kind of wonder where some of these wedding customs come from or how long or how old they were. But so a wedding cake was appropriate. Now I've got like the wedding cake in the background, and that's more of a modern one, but just it's kind of interesting.
Well, and it makes sense because with food, that would be something that they could use as a celebration because, as we
Yeah.
talked about before, birthdays weren't a big celebration
No,
either.
no.
And it was very small and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I can see where being given a cake, especially made by Muddy,
Yeah,
would be very special in its own right.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
It'd be like her giving her blessing, so to speak.
Yeah, her blessing and
Hmm.
just, congratulations and just for the celebration in itself.
Yep.
So, any information, Jeanie?
It's just that most of these they're religious vows, but they, like I said, they just joined together different scriptures and made it themselves. Like, dearly beloved, we're gathering here today in the sight of God and the presence of these witnesses to join bride and groom in holy matrimony and instituted by God and signifies the mystical union between Christ and his church. So basically, it's considered as the beginning before the prayer.
Okay.
So it's not specifically found in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
but it is scripted from the Bible. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It does make sense. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Although I can't think of that without thinking of Prince.
Oh,
Ooh, dearly beloved, we are
oh,
gathered here today. Okay.
yes.
Hey, it was a great song. I'm
Yes,
just
it
saying.
was. Absolutely. So the other information that I found that was about the wedding, this was actually after the wedding, that Edgar and Virginia did go on a honeymoon. So honeymoons were something that happened, and I did not look up if honeymoon was the actual term they would have used, or if it was just a let's get away, we're married, let's travel for a short period or whatever. And so, but
Okay.
they went to Petersburg, Virginia, and they stayed at the home of a magazine editor named Hiram Haynes. And it was said that they took a train to Petersburg, Virginia for the honeymoon. But then I
Mhm.
found some conflicting information that said that in this particular area that the railroad wasn't there until 1838. So how did they really get there?
Well, they did have um most of the time they would just use overland travel like a Constega wagon
Right,
or some sort buckboard, stagecoach, that kind of thing. However, there were some rails. They were
right.
small little things, but yeah, they did
That's kind of what
travel
I figured
like
they might.
B&O, the Baltimore and Ontario. I
Uh,
think it was Baltimore to Ontario or something. The B&O Railroad I
yes.
know has been around. I think it's one of the oldest ones.
Yeah, Jeff, my husband, would know that answer because he is a train aficionado. He knows a lot about trains.
Now I'll look that up in a minute.
Okay.
I'm found the origin of the word honeymoon.
Oh, nice. Very perfect.
It is thought to have originated in medieval times. At the time, it was common for newlywed couples to drink mead, which
Uh-huh.
is a fermented beverage made from honey, for a
Yes.
moon cycle 30 days after their wedding. This tradition was believed to bring good luck and fertility to the couple.
Okay.
These days, a honeymoon is typically seen as a romantic vacation taken by newlyweds,
Mm-hmm.
chance for a couple to spend quality time together and, get away. So, honeymoon meant that you would drink honey for 30 days after your wedding.
Okay.
So that kind of makes sense. I like that. And so they're saying around about 1546 that term involved to refer to a post-wedding vacation around 1791, according to the Oxford English Dictionary.
Okay.
So it originated with the name in 1546, but became more of a modern, what we think of a getaway in
Mm-hmm.
1791.
So it would have been called their honeymoon.
Yes, it would
Okay.
be called their honeymoon,
Nice. Okay.
and then while you keep going, while I look up now the railroad.
All right. Well, and I'm going to move away from their actual wedding ceremony and honeymoon because that's all of the information that I could find about them getting married. And
Now
so,
they got married in 1836, right? Yeah.
yes, May 16th, 1836.
Okay.
And
Just
so,
making sure. Go ahead.
yeah, so Jeannie looked up wedding customs of that time frame.
Mhm.
I looked up wedding anniversaries of customs. and traditions. So the what I found is that, believe it or not, wedding anniversaries kind of go back to ancient times, but there's not a whole lot of evidence about like gift giving between husband and wife. Like
Right.
how nowadays, you get your spouse, a present, based on just based on the day you're celebrating your wedding anniversary, and and some people get gifts based on the list of paper is the first year, but then you can kind of go to the big ones like 25th anniversary is silver, 50th anniversary is gold, and so forth and so on. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but around 1811, this is possibly German or Dutch tradition where silver or gold weddings were celebrated. And so, what that means is the couples would kind of renew their vows on their 25th, making it silver, 50th, making it gold. And so, I thought that was kind of neat.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then in 1859, which is after Poe's time, the
Mm-hmm.
Farmer's Almanac showed a list of different types of wedding, like names, I guess you could say. So,
Yeah.
month of marriage was called a sugar wedding, and 1 year was a paper wedding. So that's kind of where all that began for the kind of,
First year,
yeah,
the paper.
yeah. And so I thought the sugar was kind of interesting. But you know what? That ties in now that we know what honeymoon means: honey, sweet,
Mm-hmm.
sugary, with one
Yep.
month, 30 days of the moon cycle. So hey, we tied it all together, Jeannie. Didn't even know we were going to do
Yep.
that.
Hey, we know. Oh, and it's Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. It's not Ontario, it's Ohio. Now, it was completed on February the 28th, 1827, but it wasn't until Christmas Day, 1830, when the South Carolina Canal and Railroad Company completed the first mechanical passenger train, that the modern railroad industry was born.
Gotcha.
So it was 1830.
Okay.
So, and it's by 1835 that there were dozens of local railroad networks that had been put in place.
So they would
So
have been able to
it's
take a local train to a probably
a spot.
from Richmond
Yeah,
to Petersburg. Yeah.
yeah. So it wouldn't have been a far reach to say that, yeah, they probably just hopped a passenger train
Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
for that small
Mm.
distance.
Okay. And so I'm kind of going through, even though this is past post time, I thought it was
Hmm.
interesting for people that might like this kind of information as well. So then by the 1920s, like the big anniversary parties were formed. Think about the jazz age of the 1920s. That makes
Hmm.
total sense. And this is now American customs. And
Right.
or I'm sorry, no, big anniversary parties were frowned upon as seeking gifts. Now, they would have big
Hmm.
parties, but they did not want people bringing gifts unless it was celebrating a silver or golden anniversary. So, somebody that was married for 9 years might have a big party, but it was more about food and probably drinking and dancing and games and things like that in the 1920s.
Yeah, just a normal get together, a family affair type of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. And so, and again, that was, going into what America did with anniversaries. And then
Yeah.
other research that I found showed that anniversaries were not popularized in America until the 1860s. So just a little bit after post time, but
Hmm.
they were even bigger and even more popularized by the 1880s. So during post time, they might have, the day of, wished each other a happy anniversary, but it wasn't like what we do now.
And it makes sense because if you think about it, the mortality rate
Hmm.
and stuff, because you didn't see divorces happening It
No.
was either one or the other. One of them had to die. There
Yes.
wasn't a lot of divorces going on. And then, of course, not long after, uh, you had, you had the Mexican American War going on, the War for Texas independence was going on, the
Right.
Reformation, the Second Great Awakening. Then you had the Civil War. So after the Civil War, leading into the whole Reconstruction period, the 1880s makes sense because it was at that time when things were becoming more stable
Yes,
and
absolutely.
celebrations were happening because people were getting married again because they
Yes.
were trying to repopulate.
Right. And they were happy. Like things were
Yes.
getting back to a positive
Mm-hmm.
feeling within the world. And so
Yeah.
so like giving gifts specific to the year and holding parties did take place around the 1880s, kind of the
Mm-hmm.
1860s, 1880s. But again, that kind of shifted once you got into the 1920s of to from friends and family to the couple. It was more about the big celebrations of silver and gold. And then the one thing that I thought was really interesting, because I really thought this was more of a more modern thing, but
Mm-hmm.
at these big parties, even in like between more closer to the 1880s, some probably in the 1860s, people would renew their vows at these
Mm-hmm.
parties. So it was almost like a re-wedding in a way, a re-ceremony.
Well, it was also another way to re strengthen
Mm-hmm.
familial bonding.
Yeah,
Like if you had, for instead of convenience, you had a marriage of strength because right after that time they were having to renew that strength, especially if the parties were still alive
very true.
to do it,
Yeah.
and they survived and all that. So yeah, the reinstitution of their marriage is another way of saying, look, there's still a connection, there is still
Mm-hmm.
something to hold on to, and we are
Absolutely.
still strong.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I found about wedding anniversaries was that during the Victorian era, leave it to
Hmm.
Victoria again.
Oh yeah.
It started in England and then it moved over into the United States around, again, this was more toward the 1860s to 1880s, but through that time period, going forward. But
Hmm.
during the Victorian era, flower giving was huge, and it's called the basically the process is called florography. And so they
Hmm.
had all these different like guides that said this flower means this flower means
Hmm.
that. And so you if you're especially if you're sending flowers to a couple that are renewing their vows, having these wedding parties,
Hmm.
I would not send something that means death, or you know those types
Or
of.
belladonna that you want them to die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was
You
trying to think, because like, a lily is, peaceful,
know.
hopeful, that kind of thing. Um,
Orchids, but see, orchids were very rare.
yes, and very expensive. Yes,
Hmm.
always have been. And like,
Yep.
I've got the roses behind me, and so you better also send the right color rose. And so
Hmm.
red is obviously love, but if you send yellow, that's just friendship. And so if
Yep.
the husband is sending a yellow bouquet of roses to his wife during that time frame, she'd be like, "Hold on a minute."
Yeah, that's wrong. But yes, the I think it's interesting that there was an actual book that was published in Victorian times called
Yes.
the Victorian Florography,
Yes,
all
yes.
about with the illustrations of what each flower represented and all that
Yep,
kind of stuff. And it's very interesting that they had those kinds of things, but at the same time, it's no different than what we have in today's time with the wedding planners
yep.
picking the right colors, picking the right flowers, the venues and everything. So it's an evolution from that to now.
A-
So,
Absolutely. And I will never forget this as long as I live. Anytime, this was my grandmother on my mother's side, anytime we would talk about flowers and things that we liked, because she gardened, I also gardened some too. And just I don't get to do it as much as I'd like to, but she'd always say, "Don't ever plant gladiolas, they're funeral flowers."
mhm.
That has stuck in my head my entire life.
Oh, yes. Yes, my grandmother tried to teach me how to plant flowers, but I was I was interested. I was interested more in the flower than I was planting them.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I get that.
my mother, she wanted so badly because she loved roses and she loved to plant rose bushes and all this kind of stuff. But the poor woman could never grow any.
Oh no.
As soon as she planted, the next day it would die.
Oh, that's
She actually
terrible.
planted one time and it had started to bloom. And then my dad took it out with the lawnmower and I thought she was going to beat him with it.
Oh, that's
And
terrible.
he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I'm like, okay, Dad,
Yeah,
now you know.
my mother was a great gardener, and it like everything she planted. She had rose bushes as well, but it just the yard was just absolutely beautiful. And so,
My grandmother kept a chrysanthemum alive for over 2 years.
oh
Not a
wow.
chrysanthemum, a poinsettia,
Okay.
a Christmas poinsettia.
That's impressive because those are hard to, I mean,
Oh,
they
yeah.
can come back, they will rebloom, but
Yes, but
I've tried.
oh,
It's very challenging.
I asked her one day, I said, what do you do? Just scare it into living?
Oh, I know. All right. So, while we're talking about flowers, I'm going to bring
Mhm.
something up because May 16th is also a very special day for me. And it also ties into a character in the book. I'm not going to give away too much, but today is my official release day for the Rosebush.
Woo,
Yay! I'm so
yay.
excited. And so, if you are interested for a gothic romantic tale that has tons of Edgar Allan Poe Easter eggs, go to Amazon.com and check out The Rosebush. It's on ebook, paperback, and hardback.
Yep,
So,
yep.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah. So the rouge bush, which kind of fits because roses are a sign of love, and today would
Yes.
have been their 189th wedding anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you were talking about, and this is one cool thing, because most people, if you think about it in today's time, a 13-year-old, a 13-year-old getting married,
Yes.
thinking now, we probably at a young age, yes, we've thought about our fairy tale weddings and
Right.
all this kind of stuff. Um, that's something we would think about, but in the early 1800s,
Yeah.
I don't think it would be something that would have always been on her mind. So would she have had a lot to do with her own wedding, or was it something that maybe Muddy took care of for them
I
both?
I would think so. Maybe she, it depending on, because they didn't have a whole lot of money,
Mm-mm.
with she did have it said a new traveling dress. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the hat, it didn't say it was necessarily new, but you kind of wondered, did someone make the dress? Did Muddy make the dress? Was it bought? Did someone give it to her? You
Right.
really wonder, and we kind of wonder what color it was. There was an article that Jeannie and I both found from what it was, Poe Museum 2015, that
Right.
a private collector had a few pieces of from the dress that they were going to have at the Poe Museum just on loan.
Mm-hmm.
We never could find out what actual color it was. I think Jeannie, what did it say? Was it vibrant colors?
Yeah, it said vibrant colors here. I've actually,
And that could have
I think
been,
I've got it up here right now.
oh,
It
perfect.
said that tucked away in a private collections for nearly 180 years, two fragments of Virginia Poe's wedding dress have come to light and are on dis well, will been on display at Poe Museum. And this was in 2015. So we
Yeah.
don't know if they're still there or not.
Or if the private collector
So
probably might still have them.
right. So it says, long as source of public fascination, Poe's Child Bride, Virginia, has been subject to at least two novels,
Hmm.
which is that's cool. The Loves of Edgar Allan Poe and Edgar Allan Poe, and biographies and everything. It says, based on eyewitness accounts, the small private ceremony took place in the parlor, like you said. Um, so let's see. One of the wedding guests, Virginia's young playmate, Jane Foster, later recalled Virginia was attired in a new traveling dress and wore her hat.
Hmm.
And then, because I think you also read that already or
Yeah.
talked about that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find, oh, yes. It says, while modern viewers are accustomed to seeing white wedding gowns, many will be surprised to see how brightly colored Virginia's wedding dress actually was.
Very cool.
So it doesn't say what the colors were,
I wish it
but
did.
we know they weren't white. But
Yes.
here's my thing though. How, if they had been put up for all this time,
Yeah.
if they're still brightly colored, or you can tell what colors they originally were, they
Mhm.
had to be really bright to begin with.
Yeah, because after all
180
this
years
time, yeah, it would have, unless they were just very tediously
preserved,
preserved,
yes.
yes, then yeah, they would have faded. It's if they were out in the natural light or sunlight, any of that kind of
Yeah.
air as well.
And it says that these pieces were actually purchased from a descendant of Poe's sister's foster brother, John Hamilton Mackenzie.
Okay.
And then, according to the provenance, Mackenzie's mother-in-law actually paid for Virginia Poe's wedding dress.
Okay. There's
Yes,
that
from
answer.
which the
Okay.
fragments were taken to be sewn into a quilt. So they actually sewed them into a quilt and then they were removed from the quilt.
Mhm. Oh, I wish they would have kept it intact. Oh,
Yes. But that's the thing. It's 180 years, and
yeah.
back then, as we've been talking about, weddings weren't as revered as
Yes.
they are now. So
Mhm.
it's good that there was a little piece of that left.
I know. I would love to see it. Maybe it'll come back to the Poe Museum.
Or you can maybe contact the dude that still bought it in 1992, because I think he still has it. He's the one that put it on loan.
That's true. We'll have to, we may just have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah,
never know.
that,
Wouldn't hurt to ask.
that's right. That is so right. Well, I think well, that's all the information I could research up.
Yeah, and the thing of it is like, with everything that far back, unless it was preserved completely, because there wasn't a lot of pictures
Right.
and anything else, because it's not like today where we can just video everything and record it.
Oh, I know. I know.
Um, but still, it is interesting to know that there is some traditions, because that's what they're based on,
Hmm.
is past. And to know that the white wedding dress was not one of the biggest ones, and that we know that Virginia didn't wear a white wedding dress. So,
Right. And so you kind of wonder after Queen Victoria had
mm,
popularized the color in 1840, if they had waited till 1840 or 1841 after Victoria married,
yeah,
would her wedding dress have been white? You kind of wonder that.
you kind of wonder, but you also have to think. Now, one of the things is that white would be one of the simpler, cheaper fabrics if you're looking at white cotton,
Or a muslin,
but
yes, which would have been
yes, or muslin.
white.
But the thing
Yes.
about it is, like I was reading from the one lady,
Hmm.
her dress that she was describing, it was like satin and lace, and
Right.
that's not cheap.
No, that would have been very
So
expensive.
yeah, so
Absolutely. Yeah.
you never know. It could have been, you maybe not, but
Yeah. Yeah, because
they could have just waited because Virginia could have gotten a little older.
well, that's I was going to mention that too. Because
Yeah.
if they had gotten married in 1831, she would have been what, 18. So,
You mean 1841?
yeah.
You
That's
said 1831.
sorry. I can I
I'm
blame
like, good Lord, she'd only been like 8.
I blame it
That's
on my illness that I've been under this week.
oh yeah. Well, math is not, it's okay. We're not mathing today, so that's fine.
Yes, 1841, she would have been
Yes.
18, and so more
Yes.
close to the age of consent.
Exactly.
Only
That'd probably been
only
better.
fibbing a little bit, not a lot.
Exactly. A little better.
But
And you never know, they may not have ended up married at all by then.
that is very true. And Poe and Virginia had a beautiful love. Yes, they
Mhm.
were first cousins, but again, context, always remember the context. That's not something that's allowed today, but in that time frame, that happened somewhat often.
Yes, very much so, especially in the royal families.
Yes, that's a whole like another
That's another can
that's
of
a whole
worms
nother
we're not opening.
podcast, Jeannie.
Exactly. That would be very interesting, but no, we're
Yeah.
not going through
Oh,
that.
I
So,
can answer one word, Habsburgs, and we're not going to go into that.
yeah, exactly. No, 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 no. All right, no, but happy anniversary to Edgar and Virginia.
Yes, happy,
Maybe they
happy,
got their
happy
happy
birthday.
ever after in heaven. So
Absolutely. And they are buried together. So,
finally,
yes.
it took 30 years or something.
Oh, it took way too long, way too long.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
if you're in Baltimore at the grave, lay some red roses for their love.
exactly. So, and on that note, we are
Yar, po,
Poe.
out.
For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.